Well, hello there, my beautiful friends. So I have a bit of an interesting video coming at you today. I went ahead and put together a mock-up faux palette that has been inspired by butterflies and the early 2000s. I grew up in the early 2000s. I'm sure many of you out there can relate and can remember the simpler times of the early 2000s. So if you are interested in seeing my butterfly-inspired eyeshadow palette that I put together here, then go ahead and keep on watching and let's jump right on in. So the good news of the day is that I finally, after like 5 months of waiting, got my hair done, I got my roots done so I can finally sit farther away from the camera. Because I have had so many people complain that I am sitting way too close to the camera, and that was strategically done so you couldn't see my 5 inches of grown out roots. Let's go ahead and talk about this eyeshadow palette that I put together. So many of you guys know this here on my channel if you are not new, but I have been putting together little faux palettes and like mock-up palette concepts, and originally I was inspired when I started doing these by Makeup Struggles because she was doing palette redesigns. I believe she was the first person to do those here on YouTube, or the first person that I personally know that started doing those, and I was inspired to not just redesign, you know, an existing palette. I was inspired to put together my perfect palette, like what I would personally buy. So what got me inspired to want to put this palette together and want to go with the whole butterfly theme is actually a highlighter that I got in the mail a few days ago from Vanessa's Vanity. It is called Wild Butterfly and she is absolutely freaking beautiful. It's like a pinky blue green iridescent-y type highlight. It is absolutely stunning, and that got me thinking, why aren't there more butterfly themed makeup products out on the market? You know, we have unicorns, we got mermaids, we have fairies, but we don't really have any butterfly related things, and I feel like that would be an interesting concept to have on the market. Now, don't get me wrong, I remember Kat Von D's Chrysalis palette, I believe it was called, but it's been a while since that palette came out. It's been a while since anyone's even seen that palette because it was limited edition. I believe it came out in 2014 and I believe it left with 2014 as well. So last night I got my creative juices flowing and I decided to pull inspiration from the early 2000s to make this butterfly palette a reality. Now, I don't know how many of you guys actually remember the early 2000s because it was quite a while ago, but the fashion was interesting to say the least, sometimes and most times questionable. The trends were basically super low jeans, like past your underwear low jeans, super short crop tops, which, you know, has made a comeback. I wear them all the stinking time. But there was one particular trend that really stuck out the most to me, and it's probably because I used to wear them all the stinking time when I was little, but it was those little butterfly clips. So many people wore them, like everyone wore them. If you were like 5 to 9 years old in the early 2000s, you probably had a pair yourself. And yeah, they were definitely an interesting style choice, but nonetheless, butterflies and iridescent and hollow was everywhere. I am like 98% sure that everyone just based their style off of the Backstreet Boys album cover, Millennium, because, you know, it was the new millennia and everyone was feeling inspired to wear space-looking, astronaut-looking clothing. But nonetheless, you see where I drew inspiration from here, and obviously I wanted to stick with that butterfly theme, so I went ahead and created this design for the eyeshadow palette. Now, this palette, yes, would be in the shape of a butterfly, which might be kind of impractical and might be a little bit out there for some of you, but I personally would be so intrigued if someone ever came out with a butterfly shaped eyeshadow palette. I would probably buy it just for the packaging. But enough about the outside packaging. Let's go ahead and get into the important part, of course, which is the inside. So obviously I went ahead and stuck with the butterfly theme on the inside of this palette. I basically wanted it to be like a butterfly from all angles. Instead of the purple on the outside, it would be rose gold on the inside and have a beautiful foiled finish. I love rose gold, I love purple, I love pink. I feel like these themes go really well together and I think it looks really cute. Now, obviously, the other kind of crazy aspect of the inside of this palette is that we have heart-shaped pans here. Now, not only do I feel like this is most definitely something we would have seen in the early 2000s, like Claire's early 2000s, but it really feels like heart-shaped pans have been all over the indie brand scene lately, and I don't know how I haven't purchased any of them because there are beautiful products that are in heart-shaped pans. I feel like I would absolutely love to have that kind of product and that kind of aesthetic or whatever in my collection of makeup. I don't know how I haven't taken the plunge and just purchased one of those heart-shaped pans just for the sole purpose that it's a heart-shaped pan. It's freaking adorable. But as you can see here, we have 12 different pans of eyeshadow that are in the heart-shaped pans, and then in the center, where the butterfly's little body would be, there is a little round kind of oval pan of highlighter. I know some people really like having a highlighting shade in all of their palettes, so I went ahead and catered to the ones who like that, and honestly I kind of just like the idea of having the body as a little pan of highlighter. I thought it was a cute concept, so I went ahead and threw it in there. I also wanted to keep everything organized basically by color, so each different wing on the butterfly contains 3 eyeshadows that are all somewhat in the same color group, not 100%, especially those last 2 at the bottom get a little bit questionable as far as grouping of colors goes, but nonetheless I tried to keep it as organized as possible, for me at least, the most unorganized person in the world. But let's go ahead and talk about the color scheme, shall we? So like I said at the beginning, I wanted everything to be butterfly and 2000s inspired, so that's why we have this color scheme. I noticed some people it might look a little bit Claire's-esque, a little bit icing-esque, but honestly, if I could create my own perfect palette, this would be it. As of right now, as of my current makeup taste. You guys know how much I love a good iridescent purple eyeshadow or a good iridescent pink eyeshadow, so we have a whole heck of a lot of that going on here, which for me is right on par with the butterfly theme and the early 2000s theme. But the first eyeshadow that I decided to put in is probably my favorite or second favorite. I can't really decide because like all of these are my favorite, but this is the shade Flutter, and this is an amethyst foil with silver reflex. Like, how delicious does that sound? That's my favorite kind of eyeshadow to wear as of right now. May change in the future, but right now, that's my favorite kind of eyeshadow to wear. And I'm the kind of gal that likes a very super intense, super sparkly foiled eyeshadow. So all of the shimmery, reflective eyeshadows in this palette, even if they're different finishes, they would all be ultra shiny. So the second eyeshadow that I wanted to put in is called Wings, and this is a mid-toned pastel lilac matte. I love these kinds of shades as well. They are always worn, they're always welcome here. I absolutely adore them, and I decided to put a lot of pastel mattes in here because when I think about butterflies, I think about, you know, really light colored pastels and really beautiful like summery and springtime colors. And when I think about the 2000s, I think about pastels as well. Next up we have Fly, which is a warm berry foil with silver and pink reflex. I have a shade that's kind of like this in my collection, and it is from Pretties for Your Face. I believe it's called Crossette. I've shown it a few times here on my channel. It is absolutely beautiful, so I basically wanted to recreate that type of shadow, but just add some silver reflex to it as well, and I think that it would make for an absolutely beautiful berry smoky eye. Now, the next shade, jumping on over to the blues, is called Chrysalis. Obviously has to do with butterflies, and this is an iridescent ice blue with duochrome gold reflex in it. So this type of shade is the epitome of the early 2000s, at least in my opinion. Like I said earlier, it seemed like everyone was basing their style off of that Backstreet Boys album cover, Millennium. This is basically just that album cover squeezed into a little teeny tiny pan of eyeshadow. There are also so many different beautiful hues of blue throughout the nature world and in butterflies, so I knew that I had to include a beautiful light kind of icy blue to go along with everything else. Next up is the shade 2000s, which speaks for itself, and this is a mid-toned pastel blue matte. I basically put this in here for the same purpose as the last shade as Chrysalis, because this is the epitome of the early 2000s shade, that beautiful pastel baby blue that everyone was wearing and that everyone had all over their eyeballs. And like I said, butterflies have a lot of blue hues to them, so I thought this went perfectly with everything else, and of course we needed a blue matte to go with some of these beautiful blue foils. Then we have the shade Cocoon, which is a duochrome bright teal and a baby blue shifting shade. I didn't want this one to have any sparkles to it because some people don't like sparkle. I figured I would cater to the folks who don't necessarily want sparkle in their eyeshadows, so this one is for you. So jumping down to the lower left wing here, we have the shade Petal, which is a mid-toned pastel magenta matte. I didn't necessarily want to put in a super light toned baby pink, and I didn't want to put in anything that was too, I don't know, basic. I figured that a pastel magenta would be pretty interesting. This shade to me screams 2000s. This is like the epitome of Bratz dolls, and this is one of my absolute favorite colors in the entire world. It's always been. I love wearing this on my eyes, and I think it goes really well with a lot of the foils that we have in here. I think this would be interesting paired up with some of the teals. So Petal is definitely the type of shade that I knew would earn their place in this palette. Then we have the shade Effect, like butterfly effect, you feel me? Anyone else just think of the Travis Scott song, because I feel like that word has been ruined ever since that song came out. But nonetheless, this is a deep, warm purple matte. Now, I didn't want anything too deep in this palette. You know, we're talking about butterflies. They're really bright and colorful and pastel-y, and we're talking about the early 2000s, so we didn't really see a whole lot of dark colors then either. So this is about as deep as I wanted to go, but I figured, you know, we need a deepening shade in here. So this deep, warmer purple tone obviously goes with the purples, of course, and the pinks, but I also felt like it went with the blues as well, so I feel like it really worked with all of the mattes that we have here. I wanted everything to be as cohesive as possible while still being all unique and interesting shades. So now we've reached my absolute favorite shade in this palette. It's so stinking beautiful, and this is the shade Nectar, which, I mean, the name fits the color so well. This looks so tropically, and it just reminds me of warm weather, but this is a trichrome, and it would be yellow, green, and pink trichromatic sparkly goodness. Oh my goodness gracious. I can only dream that an actual pressed version of a shadow like this would be on the market, but as far as I'm concerned and as far as I know right now, there is nothing that exists that is quite like this on the market in a pressed form. I really wish and hope that someday we are able to get our hands on something like this that isn't in the loose form, because not all of us want to use loose eyeshadows, and I would much rather use a pressed one, but this type of shade is absolutely beautiful. This would be so stunning just all over the eyes and just calling it a day. Like, you don't need a crease color when you have this on your lids. This would be the most interesting and show-stopping type of shadow. This reminds me of spring. It reminds me of butterflies. Obviously, this would be beautiful with any of the pinks, the purples. I think this would be beautiful with the blues as well. I feel like this shade, even though it's really out there and weird, it goes with all of the mattes that we have in this palette. So you'd be able to create a super simple, easy look, but it would look like you spent so much time on your makeup, which is basically what we all want here, right? And now that I'm thinking about it, I am pretty sure, like 99% sure, that Cleo Cosmetics, one of my absolute favorite indie brands, like in the whole world, is coming out with some glittery, kind of iridescent-y pressed trichromes. So I'm curious, I wonder if they have a shade that is like this in that line. If my memory hasn't failed me here, which, let's be honest, it does about 70% of the time, but if I'm recalling the information correctly, then I am most definitely going to have to purchase that. So now we have the final three on the lower right wing, and the first shade is, it's called Mariah, and I think you guys probably already know why. I mean, if you were around in the 2000s, then I'm sure you know who Mariah Carey is. Like, come on, she's the queen. She had a song called Butterfly, which was a huge freaking hit. Everyone knows that song if you're my age, and it was just a giant symbol of pop music back in the day, and a giant symbol for Mariah. The butterfly was literally everywhere. She even came out with a butterfly soda back in the day, and butterflies were such a huge symbol for her. Basically, anytime you heard about Mariah Carey, you were thinking about butterflies as well. She had them everywhere. And while doing my investigative research here, I found a really funny comment about how apparently her butterfly soda tasted like UTI medication, so figured I'd just leave that here. And when I think about Mariah Carey from the 90s and the early 2000s, I don't know why, but my brain just automatically goes to like a super sparkly magenta hot pink. I'm sure a lot of you can agree with that. There's just something about that time period and just the style that she had that just reminds me of that color, and honestly, she is a style icon for me. If I could look like one person, it would be Mariah Carey in the 90s. But I don't even think I've explained what this shade is yet, because I've been babbling so much about me reminiscing on Mariah Carey in the 90s and the 2000s. But nonetheless, it is a foiled magenta purple with silver and gold reflex. Like, this is also one of my favorite shades out of this palette, and I think it's understandable why it is. This is perfection for me. If I ever see an eyeshadow palette that has one shade like this in it, I'm automatically considering buying it just for that one shade. That is how much I love these types of shades. I own so many in my collection, and they are all absolutely beautiful, and to me it reminds me of butterflies as well. Pink butterflies and pastel butterflies. It just reminds me of my childhood and takes me back to a simpler time when everything that I had that had butterflies on it basically had this color associated with it. But the final matte that I wanted to put in the palette is a light pastel pink matte. Now, it might look super light on the screen, but I tried to make it a little bit deeper just because not everyone wants a super powdery baby pink matte. I didn't want anything that would be so incredibly washed out that it wouldn't work for anyone's skin, but I do understand that a lot of these pastels really wouldn't work for everyone's skin tones because some of these are just too darn light. So I tried to make this a little bit deeper. Like I said, it's probably gonna look still washed out, but I did deepen it just a little bit, but I still wanted a baby pink in there, so we had to meet somewhere in the middle. And the very last eyeshadow that I wanted to incorporate into this palette would be called Garden, which should be a trichromatic green, blue, and indigo sparkle. So, fun fact, there is a type of butterfly called a morpho butterfly. No, not a morphe butterfly, a morpho butterfly. Although, can you imagine if there was a morphe butterfly? That butterfly would be a freaking train wreck, that's all I'm gonna say. Okay, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I understand people like morphe. It's a joke. But this morpho butterfly that is out there in nature has these gorgeous different hues of blue throughout its patterning. It has a teal blue, it has indigo, it has a little bit of green, and of course it has that gorgeous royal blue tone as well. So I wanted to basically capture that in an eyeshadow as much as I possibly could. And of course, how could we forget that pan of highlight that is the butterfly's body right smack in the middle there. And this would be a light baby pink iridescent highlight that has a little bit of a lime green shift. And no, I did not name this, so let's name it right now. We'll name it Strawberry Margarita just for fun. Alright folks, but we have reached the end of my little faux mock makeup butterfly eyeshadow palette. Honestly, I wish that this existed. Like I said, this would be my dream palette. This is full of iridescent, foiled, sparkly, light pastel toned colors, and I would just die if someone came out with something that looked remotely similar to this on the market. So like, fingers crossed that someone someday does. But I think it was a fun concept and it just randomly came to me, so I figured why not put it together and share it with you guys. But you'll have to let me know how you feel about everything here and what colors would you change, what colors would you add to, because I'm curious to know what you guys would tweak about this. But I really hope that you enjoyed, and if you did enjoy and you want to see more from me, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're at it, go ahead and give me a big old thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, because it helps out the YouTube channel quite a lot. So if you choose to do so, then I greatly appreciate it. But with that being said, I hope that you are having an absolutely amazing and beautiful day wherever you are, and thank you so much for joining me today and spending your time here, taking the time out of your day to sit with little old me. I hope to see you next time. Bye!